Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. There's a lot to talk about as far as this is concerned, but I know that you've written a book. Mm-hmm. It's called Authentic Branding. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And you wrote it a while ago, right?
Correct.
Okay.
About
so
15 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay. So when you wrote that book, how much of it actually touched on sound? And what do you think has changed since you wrote it?
Yeah, so I talked about the five senses and how it's so important to engross as many senses as possible. Mm-hmm. And the time that I wrote it is when Flash was still, quote unquote, relevant. And I thought Flash was brilliant. I understand the whole SEO situation, but they would have overcome that eventually because Flash websites were so much more entertaining because that's where sound was really introduced as part of the experience of watching a website, which made it more engaging, far more engaging to go to someone's website where sound is now introduced. From the standpoint of movement, to the standpoint of an intro, a standpoint of an outro, even the sound effects. What we used to do is like roll over, and you have different states, dormant and active state. Even the active state that to push that button. So all those things.
I remember those days. I do.
It was fun. It made a big difference as far as the overall experience. What happened is it wanted you to keep coming back for more. Now websites, they're so flat as far as like introducing it to your senses, because now you're just using your visual. So I wish that Flash actually came back, or another form of programming came back to reintroduce music, sound, sonic sounds, because it make a huge difference as far as that overall experience.
Yeah, part of the issue I think there might have been that people were experiencing websites wherever they happen to be. So if you're on a workstation at work and you're on a website that has sound, you may not want that.
That's true, but then you still have that button, though, the mute button.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, you totally do. But the less you can bother people when they land on your website, the better it is.
Right.
But yeah, I remember the early days of SEO as well, and the Flash stuff wouldn't even be visible to the search engines. So that kind of ruined your standing in the search engines. However, the really interesting thing now is that a lot of people are using ChatGPT now for search as opposed to Google or something like that. So I agree. I think that in that case, a Flash site could have overcome whatever as long as it was visible to ChatGPT or something like that, right? It's just, we weren't there yet. But yeah.
But you know what's funny, Jodi? This is what's interesting, is now the time is to reintroduce sounds to websites where you can still do the SEO, but then that will give you the advantage of standing out as a brand because no one else is doing it right now. Mm-hmm. So that one extra element will actually be more engaging and still satisfy the SEO because now that websites have come across in a way that now they're more dynamic as far as what's available as plugins and so forth and so on, as far as the coding. There's probably various ways to do sound where it fulfills that engagement and that experience to bring people to a new height as far as being entertained on that website.
Yeah. It's I think it's harder because we don't have Flash to give people an experience that is multisensory on a website. So I agree that it's rather flat now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you just gave me an idea though. Mm-hmm. Is that I investigate with my team to see if we can do it without Flash. We could introduce sound without Flash, and there's probably some things that are being overlooked right now as far as being able to do that.
I would love to hear more about that if you experiment with it. Yeah, please do reach out when you figure it out, because yeah, I mean, I'm all about the sound. That's what we talk about here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So the audio in a brand, how psychologically do you think it affects us? Because how do people come to an audio brand that actually fits them? Do you have like a way that you work that out with clients?
Yeah, and that's called a brand personality. So,
Okay.
in fact, one of the questions I ask when I'm in a strategy session is, if the brand listened to music, what music would listen to and why?
That's a good
Okay.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we start to figure out what kind of music we'd listen to and why, based on the characteristic of the brand. So a big part of branding is figuring out the personality, what it looks like, what it would say, how it would feel, how it would interact, how it would dress. Okay. So when it comes to looking at what music it would quote unquote listen to and why, gives us an idea when it comes to branding, when it comes to, let's say we're doing an event, what music we should put on for that event to reflect the brand. It's kind of like, when you watch commercials like let's say insurance companies on TV, you got the Flow for Progressive, you got the Mayhem guy for Allstate, right? And you got the Gecko Lizard for Geico.
Aren't
And
they the
there's
most interesting though? Like, I find the insurance industry fascinating as far as audio branding is concerned, because they're so boring an industry that they have to
exactly.
make their advertising so exciting.
Exactly, exactly. And how do you distinguish from one to the rest when basically they're the same? But they
Yeah.
do little subtle things, like Farmers Insurance will do, take the more unusual cases, but they have a very specific sonic sound, right? And same with the Mayhem guy for Allstate, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
they all have these sonic sounds that bring back the association. So when you're actually looking through, let's say on people's website where there are no sounds, it will spark an identity visually to the auditorial part.
Yeah.
You see that? It starts filling in a picture. One part of your sense can fill in the rest of the senses, right? So that's how powerful it is.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so the sonic sound and having where you have the right sound to that brand is extremely important when it comes to actually having it where it's called brand equity. Another way to embody the brand is with the sound. Okay.
Yeah. So you were talking about like what sound, what music a brand would listen to. Can you talk a
Right.
little about WSS? Because I think, that's pretty, with Snoop Dogg. I mean, like that's pretty
Right.
distinctive.
Yeah, so more like hip hop
Yeah.
because the target market. Okay, because first of all, the brand itself is basically of those of athletic footwear, and they have the most styles, 3,000 styles, and they have the most styles and most brands. So they got 80 different types of brands with 3,000 different styles to choose from every day, right? The point being is that the target market are for the athlete, specifically in the area in the space of basketball. So if you take a look at who those shoppers are, a lot of them love to listen to hip hop.
Yep.
So that's why there's now a connection of that brand personality and why that music is more appropriate versus, let's say, classical music, right?
Of
Okay.
course. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it all reflects back to the brand and its persona and who is it trying to connect to. And so that music is just another way to connect with that audience.
Yeah. And you did that for Flying Dutchman as well, right? So
Yeah,
that's
Flying
a liquor
Dutchman.
store.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The liquor store. And that's out in the Bahamas. So if they wanted to and a Flying Dutchman, it's a very interesting story about a pirate and rum. But the point being is that, yeah, it have a very festive type of vibe to it, more Jamaican type of feel to it, Bahamas type of vibe to it, right? Because it feels like that era and it feels like that genre. So that's important as well. If we to migrate to the mainland as a liquor store, that would be the perfect music to play in the background, because now you're getting in touch with the Flying Dutchman and his background and his culture.
Yeah. You'd mentioned that it was a bit of a disruption too. How is it a disruption?
Oh, the disruption was basically what we did is that we actually had a radio announcer at the store revealing what the latest labels are and the latest brands of liquor to wines and beers.
Okay. Okay.
And so what happened was it created a big draw to the liquor store so people could actually have tastings, and if there was a new
Oh yeah,
wine,
tastings would draw him in.
yeah, tasting draw him in. It's a really cool space, and he had what was disrupted. No one had a radio spot in there, right? No one had an actual someone emceeing directly from that, broadcasting inside an actual well, it is a retail store, but a liquor store.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating how they used it too. Because, I mean, from a voice actor's point of view, I mean, that's a great job for someone to have. That sounds like a lot of fun, first of all. But yeah. So they sound like their environment. They sound like the brand that they're supposed to convey. And people are experiencing that and understanding who they are the minute that they hear it.
Exactly. And the other thing that was really cool is that it was based on a culture. So what we found out about the Flying Dutchman, for example, they've been in business for 40 years and they simply didn't know how to grow. But one thing I found out when I went to the original Flying Dutchman store is that people like to gather there, but they didn't have it in. They didn't have anywhere in house inside the store to gather and sit down. Everyone sat down on the sidewalk and hung out outside. So that's what gave us the idea. Why don't we have it? We could build the community inside, and everyone did feel like family, and it was a place that everyone could actually say hi to one another, right? So it was taking what was existing, but magnifying as an actual location for people to gather.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess that's where the tastings would take place.
Exactly. That's where the tastings takes place, and that's where you had the announcer at the radio station and talking about different flavors. And of course, that only became a bigger draw as people are listening on the radio station. Hey, let's go to the Flying Dutchman. It's just around the corner. So they had big gatherings doing this.
That's wonderful. And that would, of course, make for fans of the brand. So they'd buy their stuff there. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that expanded them, I'm assuming.
Exactly. We expanded, I think it was 3 years to 5 franchises where they couldn't grow for 40 years. So it was really capturing a brand essence, and a lot of it had to do with introducing a community, but also using, quote unquote, a host to a quote unquote radio station to announce more, to be the broadcast for us.
What a wonderful strategy. Yeah. And just leaning into more of who they are. I love that idea.
Exactly. Leaning more to who they are and why they've been there for 40 years and basically capitalizing on that value, that equity.
Yeah. So other brands could definitely do this as well. Find out what is unique about you and then lean into that. And find a sound for it, find an emotion for it, I guess. Because like you were talking about, find the music that the brand would listen to. When they tell me as a voice actor what the feel of a spot is going to be, often I'll ask, like, what shoes do they wear?
Right.
Right. So it's kind of, it's a little subtlety, but yeah. It's an interesting way to think of things, and I think that really gives a good idea of how a brand comes out into the world.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the, when you talk about sonic sound like the Bahamas, a lot of times it is using sounds that are based on a region of the brand. Even within the U.S., New Orleans, for example, jazz, right? And then you get into, more of the pop culture like LA, right? But then you move into different countries and you get a different vibe altogether from that country. So there's so much opportunity to introducing sound, all the variations of sound to a brand.
Yeah. And it's super important for people experiencing it to understand who that brand is.
Right. Understand who they are, what they stand for, and what makes them unique from all others.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting exercise, and a lot of people could stand to pay a lot more attention to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna we're getting towards the end here, and I just want to get a little philosophical with you, Howard. So, why do you think sound matters? Just in general, what's your philosophy on that?
Why I feel sound matters, and we're talking about all kinds of sound, is that it creates an environment that would not exist otherwise. And I mean that literally.
Sure.
You know, it's like for me, it's like music. Like I love music, right? You know, for me, is music a big part of my life, and it just brings a certain vibration in the body and how we think and how we feel. It creates moods, emotions. It creates relaxation, or let's say that you get pumped up for, let's say, snowboarding, where I'll put on my ear pods, right, my iPods. So it really elevates your emotion no matter what emotion you're trying to tap in. And at the same time, it creates a whole spatial feel that otherwise would not be as dimensional. Like even going to a restaurant and they have some music going on in the background, and right when they turn on that music in the background, it just shifts the energy. It shifts the environment that you feel like that you feel like you're experiencing something that has a lot more richness to it.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Actually, I just had someone on the podcast named Pavle Marinkovic who talks about the way that restaurants influence how we taste.
Mm,
So
I
it's
totally get
like the
that.
sound in a restaurant is really it's dialed in order to either get the client to stay longer, to order more drinks, to have more conversation. Like there are different sounds that will induce that in a client that's experiencing that restaurant. And everyone has their own different unique sound system, sound environment, you know? And you can make sounds in a restaurant to make the food seem more salty or crunchy. And like it's our minds are so geared towards sound, and it influences so many things that it's
Yeah.
just amazing.
Yeah, it does. And it's funny because you're right when it comes to like sound, just talking in a restaurant, why some restaurants are not acoustically, quote unquote, insulating the sound is because we want to move people in and out as quick as possible.
Yes, the louder the music is, also
Yeah,
the less time they'll spend in there too. Yeah.
exactly.
But they'll order more drinks and they will drink them faster. So
Right.
it's, yeah, you just have to know what kind of environment you want to create in your restaurant. And then you can do that with sound. It's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does definitely create like for example, I have like an electric car and then I have an Aston Martin. I love my electric car because when I want to go, it just goes, right? And it's small, it's tight. But there's something about the sound of an exhaust. You know,
Yeah.
it just changed the overall experience.
Very
So I
true.
equate sound to experience.
Yeah. That's a great way to think of it. Actually, I am also going to be talking with a fellow who takes the electric cars and gives them exhaust sound.
Oh,
You can decide if you want your electric car to sound like a Ferrari.
oh, how funny. That is
Isn't that
hilarious.
awesome? Yeah.
Yeah,
But it
that's
just
cute.
illustrates exactly what you're saying, that that sound is the experience.
Right.
So
It's just a
yeah.
different experience I have. I love my little electric car, but it is a totally different experience.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. The inside of the cars are also very carefully constructed so that sound sounds good in there,
Oh yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
know.
To get this electric car, it was a limited edition, and the reason why, because I said I needed a Harman Kardon speakers. If
Okay.
it wanted to have the Harman Kardon speakers, I said I'm not gonna get the car. I told him that it
Yeah.
has to has a Harman Kardon because they said, oh, there's only a few that we're making. I said I have to have that, or I'm not gonna get the car because I want my overall experience of driving that car to be like in traffic in LA where it's not a big deal. If I have to sit in traffic for an hour and it's generally speaking, a 15-minute drive because I hit the wrong time because it's rush hour,
Oh no.
I want to enjoy my time. Like I don't even care if it's like taking me an hour because I got my music and I got my auditorial where I'm experiencing something that kind of like, it transcends where I'm at. So I don't get stressed, in other words. I just I'll just enjoy the music that I have on because I love what I listen to and in a great sound system where I'm not going to get stressed. Okay, what can I do? Nothing. I might as well enjoy the space because I actually have the sound system for it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And, I totally sympathize about the LA traffic because Toronto traffic is no joke either. It can be bad. So, yeah, wanting good sound while you're stuck in traffic for an hour, I totally get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so thank you so much for being here, Howard. This has been a fantastic conversation. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to do that? And where can they get your book?
Okay, so my book is sold globally. The fastest way is on Amazon, and it's under Howard A. Lim, Lim, and the book is called Authentic Branding. And how this book actually distinguishes itself from all others, because back then when I wrote it, when I actually produced it was 15 years ago. When I started writing it was 7 years before that. And the reason why I was writing a book, because nobody wanted to explain how to create a brand. They would write about it, but they wouldn't give you exercises of how to create a brand. And so that's when I said, oh my goodness, there's a perfect opportunity for any size company to learn what it really takes to build a brand. So that's why I wrote that book, because it literally gives you exercises to how to create brands. So
super helpful. Yes. And thank you for that. Yeah. And how can they get in touch with you personally?
Oh, they can get in touch with me at howcreative.com, HOW creative, CREATIVE.com. So that's Howard.
And that's your website as well?
That's my website. And then on that website too, if they put what I do when I'm on a podcast or speaking, I also offer doing an actual audit and assessment on their brand. So I take a look at their logo, their website, their product, their packaging, their storefront, and I give them a full hour of my time one-on-one. We work with Zoom, and I call it the online brand assessment under my services. And if they click on the service tab and they see that, click on the online brand assessment, if they put in the code HOW and hit apply, it moves it for $2,500 down to $500.
Okay, that's a pretty nice discount there. Yes. Greatly appreciated.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you heard it here. And if you happen to need a brand assessment, you know who to call. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Howard. This has been really insightful and interesting. And I wish you every success with your company and branding and hopefully more sound, because we need people to make more sound better.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.